Here in this video, I'm going to use the Lifo method given the same example that was used using the FIFO method when determining the cost of goods sold and the ending inventory balance. So as you can see here, this scenario doesn't change from the FIFO method. You have 3,800 units that's in a company's inventory, and they all are valued at or cost $22,200. So on October 13th, out of 3,800 units, 2,500 units were sold for $35,000 in total. So that's the revenue that's recorded in the company's books. That doesn't change. But what does change is the cost of goods sold that's going to be recorded in the books. The reason why that differs from using the FIFO method is because now we're using a Lifo method. Now, let me zoom in here. Under the Lifo method, this is where well, first it stands for last in, first out. But this is where it is assumed that the most recent purchases that are included in the inventory account were sold first. Okay, I'll say that again. This method assumes that the most recent purchases included in the inventory account were sold first. Okay, so this is the opposite of the FIFO method. So given this scenario here, I'm just going to put it down so that way we see how it works. When it comes to including the units in the cost of goods sold calculation, we're going to start with the end of the period. We're going to start taking units out, or we're going to start taking units out of the inventory and include it in the cost of goods sold account from the end of the period. So in this case, we're going to work backwards. So we're going to start in October 10th and work our way backwards to the beginning of the period of October 1st. Excuse me. So this is how it's going to work. So FIFO is the opposite. We start at the beginning of the period and work our way towards the end of the period when taking out the inventory and included it in the cost of goods sold calculation. Lifo, complete opposite. Last in, first out. So we're going to take the inventory from the most recent period, which in this case, October 10th, and we're going to work our way backwards to October 1st. That's the direction that we're going to take. So 2,500 units were sold. That means that we need to include all 2,500 units in the cost of goods sold calculation. That's what needs to be the number of units. That's the number of units that needs to be recorded as an expense. All right. So under the Lifo method, we're going to start with October 10th. So October 10th, we see that we have 2,000 units, right? We need to include 2,500 units. So we're going to take all 2,000 units and include that in the cost of goods sold calculation. That gives us $14,000. Here on the right side of this cost of goods sold here, we see that we have 2,500 units that needs to be accounted for because that's the number of units that were sold. Subtract out 2,000 units here that were included in this $14,000 here in cost of goods sold. This leaves us with 500 units remaining. So when I go up here, I can go ahead and draw a line through the October 10th batch because all 2,000 units is included in the cost of goods sold calculation. Next, we're going to drop down to October 6th or drop up, whichever way you want to look at it. So here, we're going to now go backwards. Now we're going to pay attention to October 6th. Now, from these 1,000 units here, we only need 500 units because that's what's remaining that needs to be included in the cost of goods sold calculation. So out of that $1,000 from October 6th, we're going to take 500 of those units to give us $2,500 in total to be included in cost of goods sold, which means that we've included all 500 units that was remaining in the cost of goods sold calculation, which leaves us with zero to be accounted for in the cost of goods sold calculation. That's because we've included all 2,500 units that were sold, and we have our cost of goods sold amount under the Lifo method, which is $16,500, which is taking $14,000, adding $2,500 to it. Okay. So this is our expense that we're going to record in the company's book that went along with generating the revenue of $35,000 when using the Lifo method. Lifo method. Okay, now we got to figure out what the ending inventory balance is going to be after the sale was made. So we scroll up here. October 10 batch of inventory of 2,000 units. That was already recorded, excuse me, in the cost of goods sold calculation. So that's no longer sitting in the company's inventory account. October 6, out of 1,000 units, we've only included half of those units in the cost of goods sold calculation. So we still have 500 remaining in the company's inventory account. And then October 1st, we didn't touch it. We didn't need to go all the way back to the beginning of the period and use those units or include those units in cost of goods sold. So we should have 800, 500, add those two up. We have 1,300 units remaining. No different than if you were using the FIFO method or any other methods, because 3,800 units was sitting in the inventory account. Out of those 3,800 units, you did sell 2,500. So that doesn't change when it comes to the inventory that's remaining in the company's books. But what does change is what dates it's coming from. Okay, so in this case, the 1,300 units that's remaining under the Lifo method is going to come from the oldest purchases from October 1st and October 6th. So this is what you see here. October 6th, the purchases, 500 units. That's $2,500. Then you have October 1st, the beginning inventory, which is 800 units. We didn't touch any of that. That comes out to be $3,200. So 1,300 units remaining, like I said, and that amounts to $5,700. That's our ending inventory balance. So we can kind of do a little comparison here between using a FIFO method and a Lifo method when it comes to recording the expense and valuing the inventory balance or valuing the inventory account. So if we go here to the FIFO method here, and I know you see there's some things going on here with the markings. Under the FIFO method, the expense, the cost of goods sold that's recorded is going to be $13,100. Same scenario. But under the Lifo method, we have $16,500. So it's more. It's a little more than using the FIFO method when it comes to what's being reported in cost of goods sold. The reason why is because, as you can see here in the scenario, from the beginning of the period to the end of the period, the cost of the items increases. So under the Lifo method, when you're assuming that the most recent purchases that are included in the inventory account is going to be sold first, the most recent purchases are going to be recorded in the cost of goods sold calculation first. So it's going to have a higher dollar amount reported in the cost of goods sold account, if that makes sense. So that's why Lifo, when using the Lifo method, the cost of goods sold, just given this scenario here, this example, because this is due to rising prices. At the very beginning, October, you have $4 and it goes from $4 to $5 to $5, from $5 to $7. So it increases due to rising prices as time goes on. When using the Lifo method, you're going to record a larger expense in the books than under the FIFO method, as you can see. Because under the FIFO method, you are going to include the oldest purchases in the cost of goods sold calculation. So you're going to start at the beginning right here. If it lets me write on there. Okay, it's not letting me write on here. You're going to start at the beginning of the period and work your way down. So this means that when using the FIFO method, you see the ending inventory balance is $9,100. Under the Lifo method, it's $5,700. Now, the reason why is because under the FIFO method, the inventory balance is going to include the most recent purchases. And the most recent purchases cost more than the oldest purchases that were already included in the cost of goods sold calculation under the FIFO method. Lifo has the oldest purchases still included in the company's inventory account. This is why the oldest purchases are going to be less expensive or less costly than using the FIFO method, which is why the ending inventory balance here is $5,700 under the Lifo method and $9,100 under the FIFO method.